Please like and subscribe to the channel if you find this video interesting. Enjoy watching the video. Another fight, Elias? Really? Sarah's voice, sharp and laced with the familiar sting of 18 years of unspoken grievances, cut through the tense silence of their meticulously kept living room. Elias flinched, not from the volume, but from the weariness he heard in her tone, mirroring his own. Their children, Leo and Maya, were both away at university, and their absence had stripped away the last veneer of normalcy from their increasingly fractured marriage. Without the easy distraction of school runs and homework, the raw edges of their discontent were painfully exposed. Their disagreements had evolved from minor annoyances to full-blown emotional skirmishes. A misplaced coffee mug became a symbol of his supposed disregard for her efforts. Her late-night scrolling on her tablet was, in his eyes, a blatant sign of her disinterest in him. Every interaction was a minefield, every word a potential weapon. Elias, a man who prided himself on his logical mind and the thriving carpentry business he'd built from the ground up, found himself utterly bewildered by the emotional chaos that now defined their home. "It's not a fight, Sarah," he retorted, his voice tight. "It's a discussion. One that you seem intent on derailing with your usual dramatics." "Dramatics?" She laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. "You think this is dramatic, Elias? Try living my life for a day. Try being constantly invisible, constantly undermined. You have no idea what it's like. And you think you know what my life is like?" He pushed back from the dining table, the scrape of the chair echoing in the quiet room. "You think running a business, dealing with suppliers, managing staff, is some kind of leisurely stroll? While you lounge around the house." The last phrase hung in the air, a poisonous dart he immediately regretted. Sarah's eyes, usually warm and expressive, hardened into chips of ice. She picked up a decorative cushion from the sofa and hurled it at him. It wasn't violent, merely a gesture of utter frustration, a physical manifestation of the emotional chasm between them. Elias stood for a moment, the cushion a soft, innocuous presence at his feet, feeling a cold dread seep into his bones. This wasn't them. This couldn't be them. He stormed out, the front door slamming shut behind him with a finality that suggested an ending rather than a temporary escape. He drove aimlessly through the quiet suburban streets, the familiar landscape offering no comfort. His mind replayed their argument, each barbed word, each wounded glance. He remembered their early days, college sweethearts whose conversations flowed effortlessly, whose laughter filled every silence. Now, silence was a relief, a brief respite from the constant battle. How had they fallen so far? He spent the night in his workshop, surrounded by the comforting scent of sawdust and wood, the familiar hum of machinery a stark contrast to the volatile atmosphere of his home. When he returned the next morning, the house was eerily quiet. He found Sarah at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of cold tea before her. Her eyes were red-shadowed, the telltale signs of a night spent in tears or wakefulness, or both. "We need help, Elias," she said, her voice small, fragile. It wasn't a demand, but a plea. He nodded, relief washing over him. Despite the vitriol, the exhaustion, the bitter resentment, neither of them truly wanted to let go. 18 years was a lifetime, woven into the fabric of their very beings. They still loved each other, buried deep beneath layers of hurt and misunderstanding. They just couldn't find their way back to that connection. This fragile truce led them to a marriage counselor, Dr. Aris Thorne. Her office was unlike any therapist's space Elias had ever imagined. It felt more like an antique shop or an alchemist's study, filled with curious artifacts, intricate tapestries, and the faint, sweet scent of burning incense. Yet, she came highly recommended by mutual friends who had, against all odds, pulled their own marriage back from the brink. Dr. Thorne, a woman of indeterminate age with piercing, knowing eyes, regarded them both with an unnerving calm. "Are you both truly willing to walk in each other's shoes?" she asked, her voice a low, resonant hum. "To fully understand what it is to be the other?" Elias and Sarah exchanged a glance. What did they have left to lose? "Yes," they said in unison, a rare moment of agreement. "Good," Dr. Thorne smiled, a flicker of something ancient and powerful in her gaze. Then close your eyes. Breathe deeply. Listen to my voice. Elias followed her instructions, his breathing deepening, his body relaxing. He felt a strange tingling sensation, a warmth spreading through him, followed by a sudden dizziness. Then nothing. When he opened his eyes, the world seemed slightly different. The chair he was in felt softer somehow. He looked down and gasped. He was wearing a floral blouse, his hands, slender and adorned with his wedding ring, rested on his lap. He looked across the room and saw his own body, his sturdy frame, his calloused hands, staring back at him with Sarah's wide, panicked eyes. What in the name of? His voice came out, higher, softer, undeniably hers. Dr. Thorne remained serene. The swap will last approximately 3 weeks. Consider it immersive therapy. You'll each experience life as the other. No shortcuts, no cheating. When you return to me after 3 weeks, we'll discuss what you've learned. She offered no explanation, no answers to their frantic questions. The how isn't important. The experience is what matters. I suggest you use this time wisely. The drive home was a surreal nightmare. Sarah, in Elias's body, drove his car with an unsettling confidence, while Elias, now in Sarah's body, sat rigidly in the passenger seat, trying to calm his racing heart. This is impossible, he finally managed to croak. Clearly not, Sarah replied, her voice Elias's deep baritone, a sound that sent shivers down his new spine. Since we're currently living the impossible, I suppose we have no choice but to play our roles until this ends. They agreed on the basics. Sarah would run Elias's carpentry shop. She knew enough about the business, having handled the books for years, to keep things afloat. Elias would take over her domestic duties. How hard could housework be? He thought, a fleeting echo of his past arrogance. That first night was a masterclass in awkwardness. They avoided each other, moving through their once shared home like strangers. When it came time for bed, a heavy silence descended. I'll take the guest room, Sarah said, her voice strained. Elias nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. Neither of them was ready to confront the intimate, bewildering aspects of this new reality. Alone in their bedroom, Elias finally faced the profound truth of his situation. He needed to change. He opened Sarah's dresser drawers, a kaleidoscope of soft fabrics and delicate lace. He chose the most modest options, plain cotton briefs and a loose t-shirt, then turned to the full-length mirror. With trembling hands, he began to undress. Each button of Sarah's blouse felt like a transgression. When he finally stood in just her bra and underwear, he couldn't tear his gaze away. This was his wife's body, a body he knew intimately as her husband, but experiencing it from the inside was an entirely different universe. He reached behind him, fumbling with the unfamiliar clasps of the bra, finally unhooking it. It fell away, revealing her breasts softer and fuller than he remembered. He had always appreciated Sarah's figure, but now he saw it from a completely new perspective. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, he slid off her skirt and her panties. He stood completely naked before the mirror, his former male equipment replaced by a smooth, feminine curve. The shocking vacancy in his lower department was perhaps the most profound change of all. He was completely female, down to the last detail. After a moment of stunned examination, he quickly pulled the baggy t-shirt over his new form, feeling a sudden, intense vulnerability. I'm a woman, he said aloud, testing the words in his new, softer voice. I'm Sarah. The next morning brought with it the inescapable necessity of showering. Elias, still wrestling with the psychological implications of his new form, stepped into the shower stall, consciously keeping his eyes averted from Sarah's body. He tried to maintain a clinical detachment, but washing required touching, and he couldn't help but notice the profound differences. The delicate curve of the breasts, the unsettling absence in his personal region, the subtle swell of hips where he once had angles. It all amounted to a much more involved routine than his usual 5-minute scrub. The shampoo, a fragrant concoction of lavender and rose, was Sarah's preferred scent. The body wash, rich and creamy, left his skin now, feeling soft and moisturized in a way his own rough hide never had. Even the simple act of shaving his legs, a ritual Sarah performed regularly, was a complex new skill to master. The razor felt foreign, the angle awkward, and the fear of nicks and cuts was surprisingly acute. What truly caught him off guard were the sensations. The hot water streaming over Sarah's body created feelings he wasn't prepared for. When the spray hit certain areas, particularly the sensitive peaks of his chest, he felt jolts of pleasure that made him gasp. The water pressure against his new, delicate anatomy below was even more surprising, a strange, swirling vortex of sensation that made his knees weak. He quickly redirected the shower head, not ready to explore those reactions further. Too much, too soon, he thought, his mind reeling. After the shower, he instinctively wrapped a towel around his chest rather than his waist, a motion that somehow felt natural, already ingrained in this new body. He dried her long, flowing hair, a task that felt utterly alien. He found a hairdryer in one of the vanity drawers and attempted to dry his new, much longer hair. It was an awkward, arm-making process, holding the dryer with one hand while trying to manage the voluminous hair with the other. By the time he finished, his arms were tired, and the result was far from the sleek, elegant styles he'd seen in Sarah's photos. Still, it was dry, which seemed like a reasonable accomplishment for now. Next came skincare, another totally foreign concept to Elias. Sarah's bathroom counter held dozens of products in elegant bottles and jars: cleansers, toners, serums, moisturizers, eye creams, night creams, day creams. He had no idea what order to use them in or what they were even supposed to do. After some hesitation, he applied what looked like a basic moisturizer, surprised by how quickly it absorbed into his skin, leaving it feeling impossibly soft. Choosing clothes was unexpectedly challenging. Bras, he quickly learned, had different purposes. Sports bras for comfort during activity, underwire for support and shaping, something called a balconette for, well, he wasn't sure what. He opted for what looked simplest and least restrictive. The rest of the outfit was equally perplexing. How did all these pieces coordinate? He eventually settled on jeans and a simple blouse, an ensemble he'd seen Sarah wear many times, hoping to blend in. That first week was a crash course in Sarah's daily life. Elias had always assumed that managing the house was simple compared to the complexities of running his carpentry shop. He quickly discovered how wrong he'd been. The constant cycle of laundry, cleaning, meal planning, grocery shopping, and errand running required an immense amount of organization, foresight, and sheer physical effort that he had never appreciated. By the third day, a new respect for Sarah's efficiency and resilience began to blossom within him. When she gave him her detailed weekly schedule and meticulously organized shopping lists, he nearly broke down in gratitude for the guidance. Grocery shopping as a woman was an eye-opener. The way men looked at him, the lingering stares, the unsolicited comments, the constant, low-level awareness of his surroundings, these were things he'd never had to consider as a man. He found himself texting Sarah for advice more than he'd anticipated. "How do you deal with the guy at the deli counter who won't stop staring at my chest?" he typed, his thumbs feeling oddly delicate on the phone. "Welcome to my world," she replied, a faint hint of amusement in her text. "Just get what you need and move on. Not worth the confrontation. Trust me, it never is." On his third shopping trip, he encountered a particularly persistent man in the produce section who kept, accidentally, bumping into him. After the third time, Elias, channeling an unexpected surge of protective anger that he now recognized as Sarah's simmering frustration, turned and fixed him with a glare that would have made his own past self back down immediately. "Do you need something, sir?" he asked, channeling all his burgeoning female frustration into his tone. The man backed off immediately, muttering a hasty apology. Elias felt a strange, unsettling mix of satisfaction and unease. This was Sarah's daily reality, constantly navigating unwanted attention, microaggressions, and the inherent vulnerability of being a woman in public, all while just trying to complete basic tasks. By the end of the first week, Elias had settled into a routine of sorts. The housework, once a bewildering maze of tasks, was manageable once he understood the system Sarah had meticulously put in place. The physical aspects of being female were still jarring, but less shocking than initially. What he wasn't prepared for, however, were the deeper, more profound sensations that began to emerge. Sarah's body responded to stimuli differently than his own ever had. Simple things, the brush of fabric against skin, the warm water of the shower, even certain scents, created reactions he wasn't used to managing. It was like his very nervous system had been recalibrated, open to a whole new spectrum of feeling. The world, through Sarah's eyes and senses, was a vibrant, overwhelming place. After a particularly long and emotionally draining day of cleaning, running errands, and dealing with a minor plumbing issue, Elias decided to indulge in a hot bath, allowing himself to fully relax for the first time since the swap. He sank into the fragrant water, scented with Sarah's favorite bath salts, and closed his eyes. The tension that had coiled in his shoulders began to unravel, replaced by a strange, languid warmth that permeated every cell of his new body. As he absently ran the washcloth over Sarah's skin, he felt unexpected responses in areas he'd been carefully avoiding. His mind, still operating largely from a male perspective, struggled to categorize these new sensations. He tried to maintain his clinical distance, to simply observe, but the body he now inhabited had its own agenda. Look, he thought, trying to articulate the inexpressible to himself, I don't want to get too explicit about what happened next, so I'm going to use metaphorical grocery shopping terms for certain things, but you know what I mean. Let's just say he was about to explore some aisles he'd only ever visited as a customer, not as the store manager. The premium produce section tingled with an intense awareness. The specialty shopping aisle down under responded with surprising, almost overwhelming intensity. He'd been fighting these urges all week, feeling like it would be a profound violation of Sarah's privacy, a transgression against their already complicated situation. But alone in the privacy of the bathroom, with a tension in his new body he couldn't ignore, his curiosity and burgeoning need finally won out. He hesitantly allowed his hands to explore the gourmet department, discovering how profoundly different the shopping experience was from this side of the transaction. The checkout scanners were surprisingly sensitive, responding immediately to the lightest touch, a delicate spark igniting deep within. When he finally found the store's customer service button, the results were utterly revolutionary. He experimented with different shopping strategies. Slow, methodical browsing versus quick, direct routes. He discovered that the produce department responded best to gentle circular motions, while the specialty aisle required more focused, deliberate attention. It was like learning a completely new shopping layout after years of visiting the same store, knowing every corner of his old familiar one. This new body was a labyrinth of exquisite sensations, each path leading to unexpected discoveries. The express checkout that followed was nothing like his experiences as a man. Instead of a single, powerful flash of satisfaction, this was waves of pleasure, rolling through the entire shopping complex. He found himself gasping, his back arching involuntarily as the Premium Membership Rewards program delivered multiple loyalty bonuses in succession. Where male pleasure had always been a straightforward transaction, building steadily to a single, focused purchase, female pleasure was more like a complex, multi-department shopping spree, with various offerings and different types of satisfaction delivered simultaneously. No wonder we'd had communication issues in the bedroom. He realized with a jolt of profound understanding. They'd been operating on completely different retail models, speaking entirely different languages of intimacy. His had been direct, functional. Hers, he now understood, was an intricate symphony. Afterward, he lay in the cooling water, processing what had just happened. The female shopping experience was entirely different, more encompassing, more prolonged, more varied in intensity, more deeply intertwined with his entire being. No wonder Sarah had always insisted they browse every aisle when they shopped together. He felt a mix of guilt and profound fascination. Should he have resisted? Was this crossing a line in their strange, enforced situation? But then, Sarah was living in his body. Surely she was experiencing her own revelations, her own explorations. The thought offered a strange kind of justification, a shared journey of discovery, however unconventional. The second week brought a discernible shift in their dynamic. The initial awkwardness, though never entirely gone, began to fade as they each adapted further to their imposed roles. Sarah reported that the carpentry shop was running smoothly, her innate organizational skills proving surprisingly adept at managing the inventory and schedules. Elias, in turn, had not only mastered most of the household routines, but had even begun to implement some of Sarah's more elaborate meal plans, discovering a nascent enjoyment in cooking. Their evenings, once characterized by tense silence or outright conflict, transformed into something entirely new. They managed to eat dinner together almost every night, sharing insights and anecdotes about their respective experiences. "I never realized how many decisions you make in a day at the shop, Elias," Sarah admitted one evening, stirring her pasta with a fork. His voice, sounded thoughtful. "It's exhausting in a completely different way than housework. The constant problem-solving, the staff dynamics, it's a mental marathon." Elias, carefully cutting a piece of chicken, nodded in agreement. "And I never appreciated how much planning goes into maintaining our home, Sarah. The mental load is constant, anticipating needs, tracking supplies, remembering appointments. It's like running a tiny, perfectly oiled machine, but with endless moving parts." They were connecting in a way they hadn't in years, truly understanding each other's daily lives for the first time, seeing the unseen burdens and triumphs. This new, empathetic understanding led to something utterly unexpected: attraction. Elias found himself watching Sarah, his wife, in his body, with a new and unsettling interest. Seeing her navigate his familiar frame with increasing confidence, observing her gestures, her expressions through his own features, was strangely appealing. There was a raw, primal draw to the familiarity mixed with the novelty. And he noticed her watching him with new interest as well, a subtle curiosity in her eyes as he moved through their kitchen, now effortlessly performing tasks that had once felt alien. His daily solo shopping trips had, against his initial reservations, become a guilty pleasure. Each expedition into the landscape of Sarah's body taught him more about her physical self, what the store layout preferred, which departments responded best to different browsing techniques. He began to understand why certain shopping strategies that had worked in his male body simply hadn't satisfied Sarah. They'd been speaking entirely different retail languages, and he was finally, truly learning hers. The deeper he delved, the more he realized the vast, unexplored territories of female pleasure, a landscape he now found himself both proprietor and grateful customer of. By the time they reached the 2-week mark, a significant, almost imperceptible shift had occurred within Elias. He no longer felt like a man trapped in his wife's body. Instead, he felt like himself, Elias, experiencing life through a different, profoundly insightful lens. And with that acceptance came a growing desire to fully embrace the situation, to explore the boundaries of this unique empathy. One morning, after Sarah left for the shop, Elias made a decision. Instead of the comfortable but plain clothing he'd been favoring, functional, almost masculine in its simplicity, he opened the section of Sarah's closet he'd been avoiding. Here lay her more feminine, sometimes more revealing outfits. Behind those, in a drawer he'd pretended not to know about, was her collection of lingerie. He selected a vibrant turquoise lace ensemble he'd given her for their last anniversary, which she'd never worn, or so he'd thought. The fabric was delicate, impossibly soft against her skin, the construction designed specifically to highlight certain assets. He spent extra time on his hair and makeup, meticulously following tutorials he'd secretly watched online while Sarah was at work. He learned to apply eyeshadow with a surprising steadiness, to define her lips with a careful hand. Getting into the lingerie was a challenge. The bra had complex strapping that took several attempts to figure out. The matching panties were surprisingly comfortable, though the garter belt and stockings required careful attention to detail and a fair bit of contortion. He studied himself in the full-length mirror, amazed at the transformation. Sarah's body looked stunning in the delicate blue lace. He understood now why he'd always loved seeing her in lingerie. The visual impact was undeniable, powerful, and now intimately personal. He spent the day in anticipation, tidying the house and preparing a special dinner while wearing the lingerie under a luxurious silk robe. Every movement reminded him of what lay underneath, creating a constant, low-level arousal that was both distracting and exciting. By the time he heard Sarah's key in the lock, he was practically vibrating with nervous energy, a mix of apprehension and exhilaration. He felt a newfound confidence, a daring spirit that he hadn't known he possessed. He was ready for the next phase of their therapy. When Elias heard Sarah come home that evening, he was ready. "Honey, I'm home," Sarah called out, her voice, Elias's voice, sounding tired and a little hoarse from a long day at the carpentry shop. "I am in the bedroom," Elias replied, his heart hammering against Sarah's ribs, his voice a soft, alluring purr that surprised even himself. "Could you come here for a moment?" Sarah sighed, a weary exhalation. "Do I have to? I'm pretty tired right now. Your job is really stressful, you know. I'd rather plop down on the couch, put my feet up, and watch some TV." The hint of Elias's former bluntness in her tone was unmistakable. "Please," Elias whined, a playful, yet undeniably feminine coyness entering his voice, surprising himself with how naturally Sarah's mannerisms were now coming to him. I could really use your help with something." He almost added, "It's important," but decided against it, letting the suggestive tone hang in the air. "Fine," Sarah groaned, a grumble in Elias's deep chest, and he heard her heavy footsteps ascending the stairs. "Are you still having problems with putting on my bra? It's really time for you to learn this, you know. You've been inside my body for 2 weeks already." The last comment was delivered with a touch of exasperated humor. She finally reached the bedroom door, pushed it open, and then froze. Her eyes, wide with shock and a dawning appreciation, scanned Sarah's form. A slow, appreciative whistle escaped her lips. What's going on here? Like what you see?" Elias asked with a sly smile on his face, a new confidence blooming within him. "Yeah, but why?" Sarah stammered, her gaze lingering on the delicate lace. "Well," Elias began, walking slowly towards his wife, the silk robe swaying with his movements, "I figure it's time that I finally accept the situation. We are going to be in each other's bodies for some time, and this therapy isn't cheap." He paused, letting his gaze meet hers, a mischievous glint in Sarah's eyes. "So, until we swap back, I'm going to embrace my current role. I cleaned the house. Dinner is prepared. But before we get to that, I think it's time to bring back some action into our love life." A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. "Oh, I like the sound of that." The weariness in her voice had vanished, replaced by an unmistakable eagerness. "Good," Elias purred, reaching out to gently trace the lapel of the shirt on his husband's body. "Unless you're too tired." "What?" "No." Sarah's eyes widened, her entire posture shifting. "I'm wide awake all of a sudden. In fact, I think I'm more awake than I've been in years." "That's nice to hear," Elias said, his fingers now deftly unbuttoning the first few buttons of his own, shirt. The experience that followed was eye-opening for both of them, a profound convergence of empathy and desire. Each of them knew exactly what their original bodies enjoyed, what sensations thrilled them, but now they were experiencing those sensations from the opposite perspective, as both giver and receiver simultaneously. Sarah, inhabiting Elias's body, knew precisely how to navigate the specialty shopping aisles of her own form. She understood the subtle cues, the delicate pressures, the lingering touches that elicited the most profound responses. Elias, in turn, now understood the exact inventory management techniques his male body responded to, what kind of stimulation truly set its premium membership rewards program into overdrive. Their shopping expedition extended well into the night, a marathon of rediscovery and profound intimacy. There were multiple visits to the premium shopping district and the bulk goods department, each one more intense and revealing than the last. They explored new sections they'd never fully appreciated, lingered in departments they'd once rushed through. By the time they collapsed in exhausted, sated heaps, something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The chasm had not merely been bridged, it had been filled with a new understanding, a sensual language they both now spoke fluently. The third week of their body swap brought a level of intimacy and understanding Elias and Sarah hadn't experienced in years. The initial shock had long worn off, replaced by a strange sense of normalcy in their reversed roles. They continued to fulfill each other's responsibilities, but with a new appreciation for the challenges involved. Sarah, in Elias's body, found herself surprisingly good at delegating tasks at the carpentry shop, drawing on her years of observing Elias's management style, but also infusing it with her own empathetic approach to the staff. Elias, in Sarah's body, had become a veritable domestic guru, even venturing into gardening, a hobby Sarah had long neglected. Their evening shopping trips became regular, anticipated events. Each of them discovered new aspects of physical pleasure from their reversed perspectives, unlocking a deeper layer of connection than their previous, less informed love life had ever allowed. They found themselves talking more openly than they had in years, conversations flowing easily about their day, their observations, and their evolving understanding of each other. After one particularly satisfying shopping expedition, they lay tangled together, the afterglow of intimacy softening the edges of their daily anxieties. "I had no idea the female shopping experience was so complex," Elias admitted, stroking his own arm. "So many departments need attention simultaneously. It's a symphony." Sarah, lying with her head on Elias's, her own, chest, laughed softly, a deep, rumbling sound from his throat. "And I never realized how straightforward the male experience is. It's like the difference between a convenience store and a sprawling shopping mall. One quick, focused transaction versus an entire day of browsing and multiple purchases. Why didn't we ever talk about this before?" Elias asked, genuinely curious. She shrugged, his shoulders moving beneath her head. "How could we? Without experiencing it, we could only describe it in ways that made sense to us. You couldn't have understood what multiple shopping experiences felt like any more than I could have understood the direct, single-minded focus of the male. We used the same words, but they meant entirely different things." She was right. All the communication skills in the world couldn't have given them the profound, embodied understanding they now possessed. Elias found himself looking forward to the specialty shopping experiences unique to Sarah's body. The multiple department satisfaction surveys, the full store inventory reviews that left him trembling. These were shopping benefits he'd never have understood or even imagined from his original male perspective. It was a revelation, a complete re-education of his physical self. Just as they were settling into this new rhythm, a new element, a significant plot twist unfolded. It began subtly. Elias, in Sarah's body, noticed an unusual fatigue, a slight nausea in the mornings that he initially attributed to the stress of the swap. Sarah, in Elias's body, became unusually protective, almost fiercely so, especially when Elias mentioned feeling unwell. Then came the missed period. Elias, who had only a theoretical understanding of female cycles, dismissed it at first. But Sarah, hearing him casually mention it, went pale. "Elias," she said, her voice tight, "when was my last cycle?" He fumbled for an answer, realizing he had no idea. "A few weeks ago, I think. Before the swap." Sarah's eyes widened, a dawning horror mixing with a strange flicker of hope. "We need to go to the pharmacy. Now." At the pharmacy, a place Elias had visited countless times for mundane things, he now found himself awkwardly navigating the feminine hygiene aisle. With Sarah's hushed but firm instructions, he purchased a pregnancy test. Back home, in the privacy of their bathroom, the two of them, in their swapped bodies, anxiously watched the small stick. 2 pink lines. Elias stared at it, his mind reeling. Pregnant? In Sarah's body? The implications were staggering, overwhelming. They were too old, their kids were grown. This was impossible. Sarah, however, reacted differently. A stunned silence was quickly replaced by a cascade of emotions. Her eyes, looking up from Elias's face, welled up. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm pregnant. Elias, we're pregnant." The twist was profound. This wasn't just a body swap for marital therapy anymore. This was a new life, conceived while they were literally in each other's shoes. The thought of raising a child, of going through pregnancy and childbirth as Sarah, filled Elias with an unprecedented mix of terror and a strange, deep sense of wonder. The therapy had taken a detour they could never have anticipated, a detour that would forever bind them in a way far beyond their initial intentions. The news of the pregnancy threw their carefully managed swap into a tailspin. The initial euphoria from Sarah and the sheer terror from Elias slowly began to equalize into a shared, profound apprehension. Their conversation shifted from comparing shopping experiences to discussing obstetrician appointments, prenatal vitamins, and morning sickness, which Elias, in Sarah's body, was now experiencing firsthand with alarming regularity. "I can't believe this," Elias muttered one morning, clutching her stomach. "Who gets pregnant during a body swap? This is beyond ridiculous." Sarah, now expertly handling a power drill at the shop, simply sent a knowing look back. "Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? Especially when you think you have everything figured out." She then surprised him by adding, "When I was in your body, and I secretly hoped." "Just a little." Elias was stunned. "You did?" "After the kids left, I felt a void," she admitted. "And then, suddenly, being intimate with you again, even like that, it just opened something up." It's crazy, I know. The impending pregnancy forced them to reevaluate everything. Dr. Thorne, when they finally confessed their predicament during their bi-weekly session, merely smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. Life, as always, finds a way. This is merely another layer to your immersive therapy. It will deepen your understanding in ways you cannot yet imagine. She then dropped another bombshell. The original 3-week swap was merely a catalyst. The true duration of the body swap, for some couples, is dependent on the depth of their eventual understanding. In your case, a new factor has been introduced. The swap will persist until the child is born. Elias nearly fainted. 9 months? In Sarah's body? Giving birth? The thought was paralyzing. Sarah, however, seemed to absorb the news with a strange calm, a quiet determination. She looked at Elias, in her body, and then placed a hand gently on her abdomen. "We'll do this," she said, her voice firm. "Together." The following months were a dizzying whirlwind of new experiences for Elias. He navigated the physical changes of pregnancy, the growing belly, the aches and pains, the hormonal shifts that swung her moods wildly. He felt the first flutter of movement, the undeniable kick of the baby within, and a sense of profound connection began to grow, slowly replacing his initial fear and apprehension. He attended prenatal classes, where he was often the only expectant mother whose husband, Sarah, in his body, looked unusually comfortable and knowledgeable. Sarah, meanwhile, thrived in Elias's body. She took over the carpentry business with a renewed vigor, expanding their client base and implementing innovative designs. She continued to be a supportive and understanding husband, attending every appointment, rubbing Elias's, her own, swollen feet, and making sure she had every comfort. Their evening shopping trips became less frequent as Elias grew more tired, but the intimacy between them deepened, forged in shared vulnerability and anticipation. As the due date approached, a different kind of tension emerged. The reality of childbirth, of bringing a new life into the world as a woman, was overwhelming for Elias. He still yearned for his own body, for the familiar strength and absence of these particular physical demands. Yet, he also found himself strangely protective of the life growing within him. One evening, as they lay together, Elias, in Sarah's body, felt a deep, almost primal ache of longing. Not just for his old body, but for something more. "Sarah," he whispered, what if we don't swap back?" Sarah, in his body, tensed. "What do you mean? What if we just stayed like this?" Elias ventured, his voice trembling. You're so good at the shop. You enjoy it. And I'm getting used to this. And with the baby, I feel like I'm already her mother. Sarah rolled onto her side, looking at him with an intensity that pierced through the swapped bodies. Elias, that's a huge decision. We'd be giving up our original lives, our identities. Are we, though? Elias countered. Or are we just evolving? We've learned so much. We've become better versions of ourselves through this. You're happier at work, I feel, connected to something entirely new. Maybe this is where we're meant to be. There was another, deeper plot twist Sarah hadn't shared. While in Elias's body, she had, in fact, enjoyed being the primary earner, the one who navigated the public sphere with a male's inherent sense of security and authority. She'd always felt a societal pressure to be more feminine, to conform to certain expectations as a woman. In Elias's body, those pressures had vanished. She felt liberated, powerful, truly herself in a way she never had before. And the shop, once Elias's domain, had become theirs, a shared legacy, but one she was now actively shaping. The conversation hung in the air, weighty with unspoken possibilities. They had both grown so much, understood so much. The idea of returning to their old lives, their old selves, now felt almost like a step backward. The thought of raising their new baby with the profound empathy and understanding they now shared, as these new versions of themselves, was surprisingly compelling. It was a choice they would have to make, not just for themselves, but for the unexpected new life blooming between them. The day their daughter, Luna, was born was a blur of intense pain and overwhelming joy for Elias. He experienced every contraction, every push, every raw, visceral sensation of childbirth in Sarah's body. Sarah, by his side, coaching him through each breath, felt every echo of it in her former self, tears streaming down her face as Elias brought their child into the world. When the tiny, wailing infant was finally placed on Elias's chest, a profound, transformative love washed over him. In that moment, all thoughts of his former body, all resentment, all fear, vanished. He was simply Luna's mother. A few days later, Dr. Thorne appeared at their doorstep. She observed them both, a tiny, knowing smile playing on her lips. The swap appears to have served its purpose, she said, her voice soft but resonant. Complete empathy has been achieved. Elias, holding Luna, looked at Sarah. Sarah looked back, her eyes full of a shared history and a momentous decision. They didn't need to speak. The choice had already been made, not consciously in a single conversation, but organically, through months of shared experiences, profound understanding, and the miracle of new life. We want to stay like this, Dr. Thorne, Sarah said, her voice firm and clear from Elias's body. We've decided this is where we belong. Dr. Thorne merely nodded, as if she had expected this all along. Then so it shall be. With a simple gesture, she activated the reversal. A familiar tingling sensation, a brief dizziness, then a sudden shift. Elias felt his muscles tense, his frame broaden. He looked down and saw his own, strong hands, the callous fingers of a carpenter. He looked up and saw Sarah, now in her own body, looking back at him with a bewildered, then joyful expression. The swap had reversed. But not entirely. The plot twist Elias and Sarah had requested from Dr. Thorne was subtle, yet profound. They had asked for a reversal, yes, but not a complete one. They wanted the experience to linger, to fundamentally alter their perception even in their original bodies. As Elias tried to stand, he stumbled slightly, his muscles feeling unfamiliar, yet strangely connected to the memory of Sarah's body. He reached for his hair, now short and neatly trimmed, and felt a phantom sensation of long, flowing locks. He adjusted his posture, instinctively compensating for breasts that were no longer there, a lower body that had reverted to its masculine form. "It's weird, isn't it?" Sarah said, her voice now her own, melodic and familiar. She reached for her chest, then her waist. "I keep forgetting to sit differently. I miss certain aspects of your body, Elias. Not just the physical intimacy, But the way people smiled at you, the feeling of your hair when the wind blew through it, the inherent lightness of being unthreatening. Elias nodded, tears in his eyes as he looked at Luna, still in Sarah's arms. He missed things about Sarah's body too. The profound connection to the baby, the delicate strength, the surprising sensitivity. But what truly remained was the understanding. He now knew intimately what it was to be a woman, to be his wife. They looked at each other and burst into laughter, not at the situation, but at the sheer impossibility of explaining this to anyone else. It was their secret, their shared, profound experience. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Elias and Sarah have found a new rhythm to their lives. They continued to co-parent Luna with an unparalleled level of empathy and understanding. Elias, back in his body, still found himself instinctively reaching for objects with a lighter touch, understanding the nuances of communication, and approaching his female employees with a newfound respect. Sarah, in her body, walked with a stronger stride, her voice carrying more authority, her business acumen sharper than ever. The carpentry shop, now effectively run by Sarah, flourished. Elias, no longer burdened by the daily management, embraced a more creative role, focusing on design and craftsmanship, finding joy in hands-on work without the managerial pressures. He also became Luna's primary caregiver, embracing his role as a deeply empathetic and nurturing father, drawing on his months of living as a mother. They still visit Dr. Thorne, not for swaps, but for maintenance sessions, where they discuss their lingering phantom sensations, their evolving perspectives, and the unique challenges of co-parenting with such a profound shared history. Today marks 6 months since Luna's birth. In just a few hours, Elias will prepare a special dinner, a meal he learned to cook perfectly while in Sarah's body. Sarah will come home from the shop, tired but fulfilled. And as they sit down, Elias might catch Sarah's eye, and they will share a knowing smile. Sometimes, the best therapy doesn't come from talking about your problems, but from truly experiencing another perspective. In their case, it quite literally saved their marriage, one body swap, one unexpected pregnancy, and one new beginning at a time. The echoes of their swap, the deep empathy, the understanding of each other's burdens and joys, the intimate knowledge of each other's bodies and minds, became an indelible part of who they were, together. A testament to a love reborn through the most extraordinary circumstances.